only ones I trust to guide you through it. They've done loans for my family. They tailor every loan to fit your goals. Fellowship is a direct lender and operates with your best interest in mind. If you're looking to access your equity through a refi or exploring a HELOC for some cash this summer for a second property, or maybe tackle those updates you've been putting off, start with people you trust, people I trust. Go to fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, or call 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, DBA Fellowship Home Loans, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York says his favorability rating dipped in a poll released on Tuesday, as many in the party call for generational changes. More from Bernie Bennett.
According to a Siena College poll, Schumer is at his lowest favorability rating, dated back to February of 2005, at 38% who approve to 50% who disapprove. That's a change from 41% and 47%, respectively, in June. The Brooklyn native is also down with New York City voters, 39% to 46%. Following Democrats' major losses in 2024, many in the party have begun pushing for a generational shift, calling for younger voices in office, as many established members face primaries from their younger generation heading into the 2026 midterm elections. Bernie Bennett, Washington.
Gilding Activewear buying Hanes brands for $2.2 billion, giving the basic apparel maker access to brands like Hanes and Maidenform. The transaction's valued at about $4.4 billion. Breaking news at townhall.com. 35 cars of a Union Pacific train derailed near a small Texas town, but there were no injuries reported and no evacuations ordered. Union Pacific spokeswoman Robin Siver says the derailment occurred Tuesday afternoon outside the town of Gordon, about 65 miles southwest of Fort Worth. It was not immediately known what the rail cars were carrying. A big name in appliance manufacturing plans a major investment.
GE Appliances plans on spending $3 billion expanding its American facilities. GE will shift production of refrigerators, gas ranges, and water heaters from China and Mexico. The plan is to add 1,000 jobs and modernize GE Appliances' U.S. plants over the next 5 years. It will affect operations in Kentucky and Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and South Carolina. Rich Thomason, Washington.
More on these stories at townhall.com.
The following is an America Matters Media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Vote for me and I'll set you free.
Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Come together right now over me.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Re-Federalist Radio, where we take a look at current events through an original intent of the Constitution lens. I am Brady, also known as the War Hamster, and hopefully joining me soon is my good friend, constitutional mentor, Mr. Constitution himself, Douglas V. Gibbs. He will be joining us shortly. Before we jump in, I'd like to thank all of those listening on America Matters Radio, 93.7 KPGF, AM 1060, and all of you listening on the affiliate networks and stations, especially ZakiRadio.com, hosted by our good friend Leo Zaki. And Doug is going through some technical difficulties, so I hope he can hear us. He knows the topic I'm going to jump into, so I am just going to jump in, and he'll jump in and he'll join us when he gets a chance. So, you know, what's interesting about this show is we started this a little over 2 months ago with the idea we're just looking to look at current events and see if there's, try to tie it into, an original intent Constitution viewpoint. Well, it just seems that this news cycle just gives us every single week we've got stuff to talk about. And this week is absolutely no exception at all. And we've got a couple of really big topics. And I'm going to share my screen for those of you watching on video. And we've got a article that broke on Monday from Just the News by John Sullivan. And it says, exclusive Democrat whistleblower. told the FBI that Adam Schiff okayed leaking classified intel to hurt Trump. Okay, so jumping into this further. FBI Director Kash Patel releases bombshell documents to Congress showing how agents traced classified leaks to sources, but the DOJ didn't act. Going on another paragraph, a career intelligence officer who worked for Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee for more than a decade repeatedly warned the FBI, beginning in 2017, that then Representative Adam Schiff had approved the leaking of classified information to smear then President Donald Trump over the now debunked Russiagate scandal, according to bombshell FBI memos that Director Kash Patel has turned over to Congress. So Congress is looking at that right now, and it brings up some really interesting questions. Didn't Adam Schiff just recently receive a kind of a blanket pardon from Joe Biden? Well, the answer is yes and no, because the pardon that Biden wrote, or allegedly wrote, because it turns out a lot of these pardons were signed by what's known as the auto pen, and we'll talk about that here today. Well, it only addressed issues dating from the January 6th investigation, which obviously came after 2021. Well, these leaks, intelligence leaks of classified documentation, and that's a very serious offense, happened in 2017. So the pardon would not apply at all. So if we see Adam Schiff on the news channels acting a little bit more, shall we say, nervous than usual, that's why. These charges hold, how much weight do these charges hold? Or what exactly could be the charges? Are they going to prosecute him? Well, it turns out maybe. You note that Kash Patel turned those over to Congress, not the Department of Justice. Congress does not prosecute crimes. However, they can make a criminal referral. Going on okay, let's talk about the auto pen, because that's going to be a big deal. And I wish Doug was here for us to hopefully solves his technical difficulties, because he'll have some interesting opinions on that. This is kind of unprecedented, the auto pen. This didn't exist in 1787 when they wrote the Constitution. So there really is no constitutional basis for whether, does the president have to actually have his own wet signature? Can someone sign for him? But I think it is pretty clear that the president has got to know, hey, there's Doug joining us. How are you today, Mr. Gibbs?
I'm fine, sir.
We are just talking about whether the auto pen, it's unprecedented. The Constitution, the auto pen obviously didn't exist 38 years ago. So what's going to happen with these auto pen pardons and other executive orders that were signed? And it's not that the auto pen obviously has no precedent. We really don't have any case history of whether that's applicable or not. I don't think, unless you do. But more importantly, to write a pardon, the president actually has to make the decision, be aware of what's going on. And it's looking like he had absolutely no idea that any of this was happening. Any thoughts on the auto pen?
Well, this is a tricky one, because when you talk about whether or not a president should be in office in the first place, for example, eligibility, and the argument has always been, yes, but everything went through its process, it's going to have to be reversed. But this is different. This is where it was an action where the president was in office but did not have anything, we believe, to do with the actual signing. And in my opinion, that would make it null and void. Now, that is not only would make it null and void, but, and sit down for this one, anybody that was a part of making sure that it happened and made sure that he was not fully aware or not advised, that is could be defined as treason. They have taken over the government from the person who's supposed to be running it. Insurrection, treason, one and the same in this case.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, it's unprecedented. We have not, well, maybe not. We might have seen a little bit of that when Woodrow Wilson had his stroke back in 1918 or so, but that was never addressed then either. We're coming up on the break, but when we get back, we're going to get into a little bit more about what these potential charges are against Adam Schiff and whether he's actually insulated from any kind of prosecution according to the speech and debate clause in the Constitution. So that's what we'll talk about when we get back from the break, and we'll see you on the other side.
Sliced fish sandwiches every day, made right before your eyes. The port of Subway could be a smoking number 5 or a classic number 8, or maybe an Italian is your number 1 fave. Whatever you crave, prepare to fall in love. Sliced fish sandwiches, port of Subs.
The grilled chicken melt at Port of Subs will warm up your winter with savory grilled chicken and your favorite melty cheese on fresh-baked pepperoncini pepperjack bread, topped with all your favorite veggie toppings and sauces. Bundle up with savory Cool Ranch Doritos, a refreshing Sprite, and a classic chocolate chip cookie for a hearty meal that'll leave you feeling oh so satisfied. Available for a limited time at your neighborhood Port of Subs, or order at portofsubs.com or on our mobile app. Port of Subs, we're slicing up the quality you crave.
Whatever yummy number you're dreaming of, sliced fresh sandwiches, Port of Subs.
Barbecue, the Butcher's Kitchen, would like to thank every customer for your loyalty and continued support through these challenging times. Call for takeout and delivery of rib tips, brisket, ahi, tuna, roasted veggies, and much more. Barbecue's open from 11 to 7, Monday through Saturday, and delivers hot food safe and healthy. Call 499-5855 for details. 499-5855 Barbecue, as featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives. Get real. Get into Barbecue Reno.
Our connections make powerful things happen, uniting individuals and communities. We are Rotary. We are people of action. With over 1 million members, we know what people can do when they come together. Around the world, generations of leaders build new friendships and solve problems, turning great ideas into reality. Take action with us. Find out more at rotary.org/action.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now,
and we are back with the second segment of Re-Federalist Radio. In the first segment, we talked about Adam Schiff possibly being held accountable for leaking classified documents back in 2017. I addressed the fact that the pardon that may or may not, well, probably was not, Joe Biden didn't know anything to do with, but let's assume that it did. The question that comes up was, even if the pardon did cover, all the way back to 2014, like he did for Hunter Biden, the question that's been out there, if this classified leak is going to be considered treason, can a president pardon treason? And the Constitution, I'll let Doug give the answer, but when it talks about, in Article 2, it says the president shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. So what say you? Could a pardon apply, or could he hide behind a pardon if it existed?
When the Constitution was written and signed and it was going around the states for ratification, and it was read, and there were a number of voices, anti-federalists, the federalist farmer, federal farmer, a bunch of voices out there that questioned this. The fear was that if treason was pardonable, then a president could just bring in all of his criminal buddies. They could just run the government any way they want, commit treason, commit fraud, and then on the day before he's out of office, he just pardons everybody. That was the fear.
Which it appears may have just happened under Biden's regime.
That was the fear. The argument against that was that there were already checks against a president acting in that manner, such as impeachment. And then, of course, one responded, well, what good is impeachment if it's the last day of office? So this was a concern. It was not changed. So, yes, every single federal offense, unless they've been impeached for it, can be pardoned. Now, that said, if there is evidence that treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, high crimes, misdemeanors really means anything for someone in high office, but these major crimes was committed, something worse than jail time could happen, because what would happen is once the dominoes start falling, the entire party would be held accountable. There would be many names put up, and it could be the death of the party, just like we saw the Federalist Party vanish after just one term of heavy control, central control over the government.
Yeah, the election of 1900, where Jefferson came
1800.
in. Sorry, 1800 was one of the biggest electoral blowouts we'd ever seen. The Federalist Party disappeared, never to show up again, except for in our they found a way to do some damage on their way out the door that we'd later pay for, but that's not today's episode.
Well, for the most part, they lodged themselves into the court system, and until about the 1820s, they did have some power in the northeastern states, but they were never able to elect a president again, and they never had a majority in the Congress again.
Okay, I want to jump back into this article because there's another constitutional question to be debated. Am I back on screen? Yeah, there we are. Going on, the FBI interview reports obtained by Just the News state that this intelligence staffer, he's a Democrat by party affiliation, who describes himself as a friend to both Adam Schiff and House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes, considered the classified leaking to be unethical, illegal, and treasonous. But he's told not to worry about it because Schiff believed he would be spared prosecution under the Constitution's speech and debate clause. Another quick sentence. No publicly disclosed opinion from the Attorney General or Solicitor General can be found making that determination as a matter of law. So the question I leave to our co-host is, could his actions, this criminal leaking of classified documents, can he hide behind the speech and debate clause?
That's an interesting argument. I wanted to read it word for word, so I was looking for it real quick. It might take me too long, so I'll just start talking here. Basically,
go ahead. I can read another paragraph while you're looking it up. I want to get this right. It's an important question.
All right.
It goes on.
I appreciate that.
But officials told Just the News and the DOJ officials showed little interest in pursuing Schiff when the allegations were brought to them years ago, citing the very same excuse. Okay. In his most recent interview with the Bureau in 2023, this whistleblower, whose name is redacted, told agents at the FBI St. Louis office that he personally attended a meeting at which Schiff authorized leaking classified information.
Okay, so the clause they're referring to is in Article 1, Section 6. I kept looking in Section 4 and 5. That's the reason I was having trouble there. I'm good, but I ain't that good. All right, but anyway, it says the senators and representatives shall receive compensation for the services to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. They shall, in all cases, except treason, felony, and breach of the peace. So treason, felony, breach of the peace is specifically mentioned. Be privileged from arrest during their attendance in the session of their respective houses and in going to and returning from the same, and for any speech or debate in either house shall not be questioned in any other place. Okay, so that last part is what they're talking about, speech and debate clause. Basically what it's saying is what they say they can't be arrested for what they say on the grounds. Now, this person was whom? He was a staffer, right?
This is the whistleblower was a long-term Democrat, registered Democrat intelligence officer, apparently with a pretty darn good reputation. He's friends with people on both sides of the aisle, but he's not just a staffer. He is an intelligence professional.
Okay, so the speech and debate clause, first of all, only applies to members of the House or the Senate, actual office holders, first of all. Second of all, the purpose of it was to keep to allow those members to debate on the floor without fear of any repercussions because of what they said. However, once again, not only is this guy not a member of the House or the Senate, so he wouldn't be protected by that anyway, but they're very specific here that in cases of treason, felony, and breach of the peace, when it comes to criminal activity, we're not on the floor, or even on the floor. They could be. This is members of the House or the Senate. If they're going to try to, so even if they want to try to play the game that speech and debate protects them, not for treason. But like I said, this all applies to the members of the House.
So what you're saying is,
and I'm sorry, the members of the House and the senators.
Yeah. So if Adam Schiff, even if it's while he's basically pursuing what's supposed to be his duties on the House Oversight Committee, commits treason, he is not protected by the speech and debate.
No, he's not privileged from arrest. See, and the problem is the people in Washington think that they're above the law because of this clause, and apparently they don't read it very carefully.
Well, I think we've got someone who agrees with you. I got another article to jump into. And this is from the Western Journal.
Good. It's nice to know I'm not alone out there sometimes.
Well, I agreed with you already. I knew what you were going to say. That's why I brought up the question the way I did. All right. Another article here from a Western Journal says, Schiff pardon is useless for new claims in FBI docs. He knew he was breaking the law, thought being a lawmaker let him get away with it. California Senator Adam Schiff is probably really wishing he'd smoked crack and filed knowingly false firearm background checks with Hunter Biden right now. This is an editorial, so a little humor there, not just factual. Schiff, it so happened, also got a pardon, but one of those weird, newfangled preemptive pardons. All right, let's talk about that right now. Can you do a preemptive pardon, which is basically blanket immunity for anything you did wrong?
That is a debate as old as the Constitution. That got brought up in the beginning, and no side has won yet. I don't believe that they should be able to, because if you read the language regarding pardons, it just doesn't strike me as or something you may do in the future. I don't see that in that language.
Well, if you look at the pardons historically, what they do is they pardon you.
Let me read real quick. Reprieves and pardons against the United States.
Yeah, and
that makes it sound like they've already happened. It's past tense. But anyway, go ahead.
A crime can be pardoned. A person cannot be given blanket immunity. At least that's my argument.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is for crimes against the government, but it doesn't say against or shall be against.
Yeah, but the crime is the crime that's being pardoned.
Right? No, I'm not arguing a crime. But even if they said we tried to use a different argument, it doesn't say that anyway. It would have said against or shall be against if that was what they meant.
Yeah, and that blanket immunity goes back to the exact same thing you said they argued about, when they were trying to ratify it. Mm-hmm. If they'd known that this meant blanket immunity, people aren't going to sign it. The Constitution would not have been ratified if that much danger was written into law.
And the Anti-Federalists did argue that there could be blanket pardons, and it was argued, no, that's not what it says. That's not what would happen. They didn't know about the modern Democrats yet.
Sure, they did. They knew about the Federalists. Same people. Effectively figuring that the Federalists didn't exist yet. So you're right. Federalists came about a few years later. Effectively figuring that the biggest levier of lawfare against President Trump would probably come under scrutiny now that he was again current president. Schiff was given immunity for his activities, but only as it related to the J6 Kangaroo Committee. That's important for two reasons. First, it appears that Schiff either doesn't understand real estate law, and that's funny, because he listed two primary residences, but also John Solomon has information that Schiff might also be in trouble for House Intelligence Committee shenanigans not related to January 6th. And it gets down to the source, Just the News reporter, considered the classified leaking to be unethical, illegal, and treasonous. He's summing up the article. That's pretty much what the story is here, Doug. I think it's pretty clear that Adam Schiff is probably lawyering up right now.
No doubt in my mind.
Where do you think it goes? These are all being referred to the House for investigation. These are not necessarily criminal referrals. The House can refer to the DOJ. Why not go straight to the DOJ?
Well, you need to have as much, what's the right word? As much evidence and a case. You got to build the case first. And they won't. And yes, I know that's what the Department of Justice does. But see, Department of Justice then has to subpoena these documents. The House has access to things through committees without having to necessarily go through the subpoena process.
Very good. And that should take us into our next break.
Local, choose local, grow local, but who the heck really is local? You can shop with locals at the Nevada Marketplace in the Reno Town Mall and search for locals at buynevadafirst.com. We're all local all the time.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers. If you administer insulin 3 or more times per day or use an insulin pump, call now and learn how a CGM can help you.
Painless. No more pricking my finger.
No finger pricks.
Convenience. They delivered it free, and they took care of all the paperwork.
You can reduce pain right away. Plus, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you spend more time in range. And if you have insurance, you can get a new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. Call now and get free shipping of your new CGM. Plus, we'll bill your insurance for you. 800-432-8150. 800-432-8150. 800-432-8150. That's 800-432-8150.
Long ago, you wouldn't think of galloping on a horse while doing calligraphy, and you wouldn't have attempted to ride your bike while typing a letter. Yet you think you can safely operate a multi-ton vehicle while texting? Behind the wheel is no place to multitask. If you want to BRB, drive now and text later. Lives depend on it.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Text and whatever. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now back to the show.
And we are back. I am Brady, also known as the War Hamster, joined today by my regular co-host, Mr. Constitution, Douglas V. Gibbs. We are, it's funny, Doug, I know you got here a tad late. In the intro, I was explaining, we don't have to do a whole lot of homework to figure out topics for this show, because this news cycle gives us so many constitutional questions. It's almost too easy to come up with topics, this day and age. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
It's funny because I hear both sides when it comes to that. Both sides are convinced that there's all kinds of anti-constitutional activities happening, depending on if you're for or against the current president.
Yeah, and that's one of the criticisms of modern politics is, and this was predicted by a couple people years ago, but, the party in power has a tendency to ignore the Constitution when they can, or most of the parties in power. The party out of power all of a sudden dusts off their Constitution and rereads it and thinks they've got all kinds of new arguments that they ignored for the prior 4 or 8 years. So there's nothing new about this. It's just probably a little bit more amplified in this day and age. We've got another story that is definitely worth talking about. And I'm going to throw that up on screen. And this one is from BBC. We like to use sources from all around the different, across the spectrum. It says Trump deploys the National Guard to Washington, D.C. and pledges a crime crackdown. And that is the biggest topic of the week, I think. It says President Trump said he's deploying the National Guard to Washington, D.C. and taking control of the city's police force as he pledged to crack down on crime and homelessness in the city. Trump declared a public safety emergency on Monday, deploying 800 National Guard troops to bolster hundreds of federal law enforcement officers who were deployed over the weekend. It's becoming a situation of complete and total lawlessness, he told reporters. Now, the Democrats have been outraged, saying, how can you say this? Crime in Washington, D.C. is down from 2024. Well, Trump said, no, it's up by almost 300% since 2019, and that is true. The difference between 24 and 25, it turns out that there's one of the police, not a chief, but one of their muckety-mucks is in deep trouble for falsifying crime records going back a couple of years. So the numbers that are being cited by the Democrats of declining Crime statistics in Washington, D.C., well, first of all, that's declining under President Trump, which is an interesting argument that they're ignoring. But also, we can't trust those numbers. But we do know they're significantly higher than 2019. Agreed?
Agreed. And, as an individual, you don't decide whether or not you're going to lock your door on if crime statistics went up or down outside in your town. Even if the crime rate's going down, if there's at least one criminal out there, you're going to lock your door. That's what you do. That is, first of all. Second of all, when it comes to Washington, D.C., the argument really is, and I apologize if I'm taking away your next question here, can the president do this?
Can the president do this, Doug?
I was sure it was there. There are laws in place, and while I don't like emergency power type laws, one thing we have to remember is Washington, D.C., the city was created by law.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting dichotomy going on here. During the press conference, Trump mentioned, maybe going in and cleaning up cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, etc., some other big cities that have awful crime rates and other problems, drug use, homelessness, all that. Washington, D.C. is a different case because all the others are incorporated by states. Washington, D.C. was incorporated by Congress.
By Congress in 1871 with the Organic Act, and it had provisions in it that allows for Congress and or the executive to take action when necessary.
Well, I'll take you back further than the Organic Act of 1871, because we also had the Organic Act of 1801, which placed D.C. under the direct control of Congress. And
it already was under control of Congress, but what they did is they divided it into two counties, and they created more federal authority over it by also giving it judicial seats as well.
Yeah, and they lost representation, though, in presidential elections. We had the 23rd Amendment. Okay, we had the Organic Act of 1871. All right, let's give it a brief mention of exactly what the Organic Act of 1871 is. This is a topic that comes up all the time. Doug and I have done videos debunking one of the more out there internet theories, but we run into it time and time again. So let's do a quick. Let's just address that real quick because it's going to come up in the debate. Did the Organic Act of 1871 make the United States of America a corporation?
No.
Yeah, the theory behind it.
And let's say this real quick. The term corporation was actually used by Alexander Hamilton during the Constitutional Convention, saying that the states should be nothing more than corporations. What he meant was like provinces. In other words, they wouldn't have any as much self-control. There'd be a smaller entity controlled by a larger entity. And that's essentially what cities are. If you look at unincorporated areas, they're really more under the control of a county. If you have a city with that's a charter city, they have self-control. But if they become a general law city and they're incorporated as such, then they come under state control more so than they would otherwise. And that's what they're talking about here, is making Washington, D.C. Its own entity, like a charter city, but still with some control by the federal government. That's what they meant by turning into a corporation. Now, here's the thing about it, though, and this is the point I wanted to get at, is Washington, D.C. was never supposed to have residents in the first place. It's supposed to be the seat of government, like The Hague. People don't live in The Hague. It's the seat of government. And that's the way D.C. was supposed to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about going back to that, ceding the land back to Maryland and Virginia, except for the governmental buildings. And that's a pretty good argument for that.
Yeah.
Just going back to this, if you want to get all the details of why the 1871 incorporation theory is false, please go to my Rumble channel, which is war_hamster. Type in 1871 corporation debunked. And Doug and I have a whole 90-minute show on that with our friend Coach Mel. And we did a pretty good job. But the high-level arguments, the theory says that in 1871, the bankrupt United States of America sold itself to the Vatican Bank and the City of London, and we've been run by the banks ever since. A couple problems with that on a high level. We do go into a lot more detail. We're not going to do that today, but the Vatican Bank didn't even exist till 1942, so that didn't happen. The other part is the United States wasn't bankrupt after the Civil War. They didn't borrow money from Europe. The European banks wanted to charge 30 to 35%. United States said no. Lincoln then, well, it's actually Chase, Salmon P. Chase is the guy who designed it, came up with the idea of a fiat currency known as the greenback. And between that and the silver rush in Nevada, that is how the North financed the war.
The silver rush being a very huge key in that.
Yeah. We're not going to go into any more detail on that for that part of it today, but it's interesting. Because that's going to come up.
In the long run, though, you got to remember, too, that D.C. is a federal property. Even though it has its own mayor and all that, it is a federal property. And the president can execute whatever he needs to inside of federal property. Now, if they want to go into some place like Chicago or whatever, like they talk about, they got to get permission of the state to do so. That's the difference.
So what we're really talking about here is posse comitatus, which is basically the ability to put troops in your own domestic soil. Can Trump send troops into other cities? Or he can, but obviously he can in D.C. We've actually got a long history of this, and it starts with, I guess we'll take it back to 1877 with Reconstruction. The South is under military occupation. There's military districts and it's subject to martial law. That was up until the end of the war to 1877. The federal government was deploying soldiers into the South. Now, in 1877, when they all decided to hug and sing Kumbaya, the Southern representatives, they come back and they want to make sure a federal occupation never happened again. So they passed the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act. Also related to that was Rutherford B. Hayes had sent in troops to break up a railroad strike. Federal troops to settle a domestic dispute. That's why they passed the Posse Comitatus Act. A little more history behind it. They actually wanted to have the ability to enforce the quote-unquote civil rights parts of the 14th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act that came before that. And you'd see Eisenhower do this later on in the 1950s to enforce the the more modern Civil Rights Act. Care to comment on that?
Well, first of all, we need to differentiate between the military and the militia. And United States military is technically is not supposed to be used on our soil except for invasions, things like that. But the militia, which is what the National Guard falls under, can be. Article 1, Section 8, that the Congress shall have the power to provide for calling forth a militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. So this is the reason why the ICE situation was very important. Absolutely, the National Guard can be called in because what is the ICE trying to do? Execute the laws of the country. So the National Guard's brought in to help execute the laws of the Union. But then it also says that so the Congress shall have the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia for the governing of such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. So when are they reserved for use in the United States? Once again, Congress has some control over the militia. While the militia does belong to the states first, if they are called for federal service, they're representing the federal government and they can be used to do the things they're doing. Then, of course, the last part that's very important, and this is one that is very near and dear to some people's hearts, is Article 4, Section 4. The United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion. Now, when it comes to domestic violence and on application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. Remember, I said earlier, going into those cities for the purpose of the violence of crime, they need to get permission of the state. That's where that comes from.
So, Washington Mayor Muriel Bowser, do I have it right? Bowser claims that there's like a 30-year low in violent crime in the city. But when we come back, we'll talk about somebody else who knows a little bit about that, who disagrees. And we'll also talk a little bit about exactly what can and can't President Trump do under these acts that are clearly, the laws are very clear on this, whether he can do to Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. is under the incorporation of Congress. And Trump can.
Federal property.
He can, for 30 days, he can do whatever he wants. If he wants to go any further, Congress has to extend. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get back from the break.
In times of market volatility, it can be a good reminder to revisit your financial strategies to make sure they align with your goals. Call 775-674-2222 or visit nvretirementplanners.com. Advisory services are offered through Nevada Retirement Planners, an investment advisor in the state of Nevada. Any insurance products and services are offered through Nevada Senior Advisors. Nevada Retirement Planners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Nevada Retirement Planners does not provide legal or tax advice.
Hi, I'm Noreen Leary, CEO of the Veterans Guest House. Guest House is a home away from home for our veterans and their families who travel to Reno for medical care. Our house is more than just a warm bed. It's a place of camaraderie where veterans can find support and long-lasting friends. We serve veterans, men and women, young and old, Navy, Army, Marines, Coast Guard, and Air Force. Wherever they hail from and whatever their circumstance, the Veterans Guest House is ready to support them. The reason we feel so strongly about our mission is that we know that many veterans would forgo their medical treatments because they simply can't afford the accommodations. The Guest House is one of a kind in the country, funded entirely through private donations. Want to know how you can help? There are many ways you can be involved, from volunteering, providing dinners, or supplying items from our wish list. Find out more about the Guest House at www.veteransguesthouse.org. Serving veterans today, tomorrow, and for years to come.
Barbecue, the Butcher's Kitchen, would like to thank every customer for your loyalty and continued support through these challenging times. Call for takeout and delivery of rib tips, brisket, ahi tuna, roasted veggies, and much more. Barbecue's open from 11 to 7, Monday through Saturday, and delivers hot food safe and healthy. Call 499-5855 for details. 499-5855 Barbecue, as featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives. Get real. Get into Barbecue Reno.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900, extension 2. Now back to the show.
And we are back for our final segment of Re-Federalist Radio. And I'm Warhamster Brady with Douglas V. Gibbs. We are talking about the Trump taking over Washington, D.C. Now, this goes back to something from 1973 called the Homeland Rule Act of Washington, D.C. from 1973. This gave Washington District of Columbia residents the ability to elect their own mayor and a city council. But Congress retains the ultimate oversight. They issue the charter, they can pull it back.
And let me say this real quick. Prior to that mayor, it was called a governor who was appointed by Congress.
There is a section of the Homeland Rule Act called Section 740, where Trump can basically go in, do whatever he wants for 30 days. Longer than 30 days, it requires congressional approval. I was listening to a show by one of our excellent constitutionalists named Brian McClanahan, and the example he used is they're talking about building a new stadium in D.C., and Trump is basically saying, well, no, unless you change the Redskins' names back, from the Commanders back to the Redskins. And yeah, he can probably do that because it is, with the help of Congress, with the support of Congress. Yeah, he can halt that building. But all of those issues, all these laws that allow Trump to do this in D.C., they don't exist for cities outside of the District of Columbia because all these other cities and towns around America are incorporated by their states, which means the state can actually dissolve a city or a town if they so choose. How do you see this playing out, Doug?
I see crime going down. The general public will praise Trump for it, and the Democrats will continue to deny that the crime is gone or that he did anything right.
What good does it do you to have the National Guard come in and assist the police with arresting people if the court system doesn't prosecute anybody under the age of 18, period, or just basically releases them on stuff like cashless bail?
If they continue to play that game, we're going to see either impeach judges or, this is what I think should happen, a repeal of the 1871 law.
Yeah, it brings up a really interesting question is, we always talk about, you can never get a fair trial in Washington, D.C. Should the District of Columbia even have a district court at all?
No.
You've got a city completely dependent on the federal government and federal government employees. They are doing everything they can to protect the state, the bureaucracy. You cannot get a fair jury.
Well, and having judges in D.C., it's in a sense, it's a conflict of interest.
And it's an easy fix.
Yeah.
And it's an easy fix because Congress, right there in the Constitution, Congress is the one that appoints where we should have district judges. So this is something that can be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are there too many establishment Republicans to make that happen? Probably right now. But it's something we absolutely ought to be talking about.
Well, if we see some changes here when it comes to the elections and integrity after the next election, that may change.
Yeah, and this leads into some of our favorite topics. I mean, the big one is, a lot of this, the big, shall we say, the conspiracy. The big conspiracy case is actually looks like they're going to be hearing the grand jury in Florida to avoid that topic, which is important because you're not going to get a fair jury or grand jury or anything in Washington, D.C. We saw Special Counsel Jack Smith playing shenanigans by investigating stuff that was happening in Florida in a D.C. grand jury, and then out of nowhere, he finds a Florida grand jury and passes the indictment there. That he's going to get in trouble for that one too, because that's just not the way that works.
There is a Christian axiom: your sin will always find you out, and I think that's what's happening. Now, Letitia James is now also got all kinds of problems. We've got two prosecutors over J6 bragging that people were being arrested for misdemeanors. It will all, I think, eventually flush out. I really do.
And we're seeing a lot of whistleblowers, just like the gentleman who talked about Schiff, and he came forward 7 years ago and they ignored him. Right. Now he's coming forward and they're listening to him.
Right.
We're finding out that there were good actors, or straight shooters, I should say. I don't like going good or bad, white hat, black hat, but there are straight shooters in the FBI and in the CIA. And these people are true patriots. They tried to stand up, but it's tough. You put your whole career on the line, being law enforcement, and you're a whistleblower, you're supposed to have protections, but we got a whole army of whistleblowers from the FBI over the last 5 years under the Biden regime who got kicked out. And, some of them have gotten their positions back or gotten rehired, but it's pretty hard to give up your entire career for principle. And that's really the problem. And the bureaucracy itself has become a self-reinforcing Praetorian Guard. And when you talk about the deep states, that's what the deep state is. Presidents come and go. Parties come in and out of office, but the establishment, the bureaucracy remains. And that's just not for domestic issues. That's for the international foreign policy, which is a big topic that I've been doing with Colonel Towner Watkins on my Shadow State series, which airs most Thursday.
And that's why term limits would never work. Because, you're never going to, your trees are never going to survive if the root system and the ground is rotten.
Yeah, and that's a very good analogy. You talk about if this election system ever gets fixed. Well, we kind of segue into one of my favorite topics I usually hit on at least once or twice. These prosecutors that are soft on crime in a lot of cities have been winning elections because of Soros money. Mm-hmm. We can't have international money coming there affecting our elections, period. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. One thing the Republicans and Democrats agree on, at least the voters do, is to get the money out of politics. That's a very, very popular agenda, and there's ways of doing it. You can make it so that campaign donations can't cross state lines. You could make an amendment where campaign contributions can only be made by registered voters in the district in which they live. These are common sense fixes to all this super PAC money that everybody hates and this foreign money coming in. We're exposing the foreign money laundering coming through Act Blue in real time. That's being done by citizen journalists and investigators. There's a strange corner of the internet where I frequent where a lot of that uncovering has been done. And I've contributed a little bit, but there's some people have been carrying some pretty heavy weight there. Act Blue is not going to be around in 2 to 4 years. They've been involved in criminal money laundering. And correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, isn't it already illegal to bribe a public official?
Yes. And when it comes to bribing a public official, specifically, especially when it comes to influencing their vote and whether or not they even vote. Not that I'm bringing up anything down in Texas at all.
No, in fact, I got into it with one of the big election a denier of election deniers, or whatever you want to call it. It's a guy out of Arizona. I got into him on Twitter last night and just told him, look, once again, you're trying to make an excuse over and over again instead of negotiating good faith that, guess what? There are vulnerabilities in our elections because we do find all these cases week after week. You may say they're always small, but the fact that the vulnerabilities are there, you should be helping us. If you're an election guru, you should be helping us get rid of those vulnerabilities. And they don't. They keep making more complex systems like voting machines. And anytime you want to question it, we're an election denier.
Well, the other thing is, too, you keep talking about the foreign money, and the foreign money isn't just coming in through elections. I mean, look at the protesters already within 48 hours of the Washington, D.C. thing out there. Foreign money is coming in everywhere.
Yeah, well, the citizen journalists are all over that. We've been tracking down the advertisements for rent-a-mobs, and that's going to have a short-lived cycle. That's coming to an end very soon. The Act Blue stuff is one that really has to stop. But where was I going to go with that, rent-a-mob? You blew my train of thought there.
Sorry.
Election integrity is what we're talking about. Oh, redistricting, which is going on right now. Well, we don't have time to do that. We'll have to do that next week.
Well, let me say this real quick. So the people who are guilty of gerrymandering across the country are accusing their opposition of gerrymandering, and the gerrymandering that their opposition is doing is actually making the districts less gerrymandered. In other words, they don't look like snakes anymore so much.
Yeah. To show how far back this goes, gerrymandering comes from a gentleman who was at the Constitutional Convention by the name of Gary, and it was because one of the districts in his state looked like a salamander, so they called it a gerrymander. Or he was the one complaining about that.
Yeah, well, no, what it was is he was a moderate Jeffersonian Republican and somehow pulled off getting elected in Massachusetts, the big lefty state. That's something never changed. And in order to hang on to power, what the Republicans did is they gerrymandered because it was so difficult in such a stronghold of the Federalist Party. And then a reporter says, well, that district looks like a salamander. Oh, it's a gerrymander. And it is stuck.
Yeah, and we've got a bunch of those around the country today. But not only that, but election. I got accused last night of thinking that, just because of the 2020 election, a bunch of people just became election deniers. And, elections have always been secured. No, they have not. We've had dirty elections since we've had elections. We had Tammany Hall in New York. You had Lincoln's, what would they call the know-nothings, were out there intimidating.
Watch the movie The Gangs of New York.
Yes, it has always been that bad. In fact, in 2016 or so, Jimmy Carter headlined a blue ribbon panel and talking about how bad and dirty our elections were, what needed to be fixed, especially no machines. And this started because the Democrats have been out of shape since the hanging chads of the 2000 election, and they actually have an argument. And some people think the hanging chads were deliberately deliberately sabotaged so that the people would cry out, we need voting machines. And 2004, Smartmatic comes into the picture. But this is not a new problem. It's been going on since there's been such thing as voting.
That's the reason why. One of the reasons they created the Electoral College. It not only eliminated pure democracy, but it made it very difficult to commit fraud in the election.
Yeah, I do like the idea of the thumb and the ink. That actually makes a lot of countries do that. It actually makes a lot of sense.
And Mexico has voter IDs, a specific ID for voting.
Oh yeah, that's right across our border. All right, we're coming up on the end of this. I just want everyone to appreciate what a trooper Doug is. He has had a very tough week physically. So thanks for making it out here, Doug. You want to tell everyone where they can find you?
DouglasVGibbs.com, DouglasVGibbs.com. I'm blogging just about every day. We are doing a lot of work. You can see me also on different podcasts, radios, shows throughout the country. Just go to DouglasVGibbs.com.
Anything good, exciting coming up soon?
Well, you talk about my travels?
No, well, more of your shows, everyone. We got about 30 seconds to you can talk a little more. We do have a Friday show, not our normal schedule, of doing the Re-Federalist Report, where Doug and I are going through the Madison's notes from the Philadelphia Convention in 1787 to find out what the real and original intent of the founders was, in their own words.
I have an event stop at San Diego State University on September 17th and Lake Havasu on September 20th. So if you live in those areas, you want to see me live, there you go.
And it's worth it. I've seen Doug speak live about 100 times, and I still enjoy it every single time. The guy is great. You ought to have him come, have him speak at your church, your group, whatever. All right, everybody. Till next week. Cheers.